I want to ask you about your interviews with Nasrallah and what you can share with us about him as a person, and how these interviews were even arranged.
Well, I mean, I write in Arabic regularly in a radical leftist newspaper. But before that, I wrote in, here and there, and I was present on social media and I had a blog that some people knew
The
about,
Angry Arab.
the Angry Arab, and also I appear on Arab media since the late 1990s, and I also was giving a lot of lectures in Arabic in Lebanon at the time, in which I speak about Palestine. So I asked for a meeting to interview him late 90s or 2000, something like that. And I interviewed him, and they never, unlike people who tell you stories, because I read a story by somebody who works for Al Jazeera, and he said how he was put in the trunk of a car and blind. I was never blindfolded. I was never put in a car with fumed windows. I was never searched. I even one time said, like, you need to search me. And they were like, no, we're fine. So even though I go there and he knew that I'm a secular leftist with
Yeah.
a Marxist-Leninist pedigree and so on, and it was never an issue. And
And by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to, for those who don't know, Hassan Nasrallah, of course, was the who was just killed by Israel, and was the head of Hezbollah.
correct. And with me, at least, I can speak about my experience. I would be very tough in my questioning. I asked him about Iraq and how they made alliances with the pro-occupation Shiites in Iraq and so on. And he would answer me very frankly. And he also listened. Unlike most people I have known or talked to, presidents, prime ministers, he is a listener. He listens to people when they speak. He does not carry his weight in conversations. He accepts criticism. One time, after the war in Iraq 2003, I sat down without any social courtesies that are common. I bombarded him with a series of questions about the party's position in Iraq. And he started to laugh. And I said, why are you laughing? He said, because your name was mentioned in my presence a few weeks ago. And I told the people there, Dr. Assad is an American, more than he is an Arab. And I said, why would you say that? He said, well, because Arab, when they come to see you, they ask about the family, about the children, about the health. And you come and you always bombard me with three-part questions without the social pleasantries and courtesy and so on. So he does have a sense of humor. I asked him a lot about, differences with other movements, experiences in sitting on dialogue committees, about his views of Israel, about their media strategy. I asked him also, one time I specifically asked him about his dealing with Arab governments, because he spoke about the Qatari emir wanted to meet him at one point and so on. And uh, I spoke about his strategy in Lebanese politics, which I've always viewed very critically, and I thought it was totally unsuccessful and even bad for the agenda of resistance against Israel. I asked him about his personal readings, and he explained to me that he used to read religious literature, which is required because of his clerical rank. And he said that that has suffered because every day he spent hours on reading on Israeli affairs and translation from the Hebrew and so on. He did study some Hebrew, by the way, in addition to his fluency in Persian and Arabic. He doesn't know Western languages. He told me that he has media assistant who translate for him social media. And he told me sometimes they translate some material from my blog about stuff that I've said and so on. He has, strong presence, obviously. He does have sense of humor, which is very unusual. I grew up in Lebanon, and the Muslim clerics, Sunnis and Shiite, are always very stern looking. They don't joke. And one time I asked him, because he was laughing, I said, how come Muslim clerics don't laugh or smile? Why is that? And he just laughed. He didn't answer me about that. I think it'd be too embarrassing to his colleague in the movement, in the clerical movement. So yeah, these are my impression. Uh, he had extremely powerful role. I would say the role he played as a speaker, as an orator in the Arab world is not comparable to any except Jamal Abdel Nasser, who died in 1970. Don't get me wrong, Jamal Abdel Nasser was a far more international figure and so on. He had more responsibilities. He wanted to unite the Arabs, he wanted to fight Israel. His agenda was much more cumbersome and burdensome. No wonder he died at 52,
Right.
assuming he wasn't killed by the
Right.
American, which is something I've always suspected when I was growing up. Um, um, so for that reason, like his death is a severe blow to the movement. And for that, and I've said this in Arabic, I would not call this war a victory like I would 2006.
Mm.
It is not a victory because it decapitated the leadership, it killed Hassan Nasrallah, the leader. It also exposed tremendous security breaches, largely electronics and largely American,
Right.
within the movement. But it is no question it was legendary in terms of steadfastness,
Mm.
that despite these losses and the blows, they continued to resist. They would not succumb, they would not surrender, and they fought to the very last day. And they were able to rebuild, regroup, and fight. This is not like the PLO. The
Mm.
PLO would, they gave in too quickly, I think, to the Israelis. Not because of the lack of courage on the part of the fighter, please don't get me wrong, but it is a different leadership. The leadership of Sinwar and Nasrallah is much more fierce, much more resilient, and much more serious. Arafat was more buffoonish, clown like in comparison.
I just wanted to quote something that you wrote in an article that you wrote about Nasrallah for Consortium News. You write, it can be said that Nasrallah Lebanonized the party and reduced its heavy religious content, which characterized its rhetoric for much of its early history. Nasrallah persuaded his colleagues in the party to abandon once and for all the declared goal of an Islamic republic. So this image that you describe here, that you present, really contradicts this radical terrorist portrait painted of him in Western media. What else does the Western media get wrong about him?
Well, that's a good question, and I would say that certainly Hezbollah has a long history. And every leader of Hezbollah left his mark. The first one was a horrible man who now is in the Saudi camp. His name is Sabih Tufaili. He was the one who was in charge when they kidnapped innocent Lebanese Jews, kidnapped Westerners, and so on, who did not do anything wrong. They were innocent, and some of them were exchanged. Some of them were, all of them were exchanged, I believe, most of them. But some Lebanese Jews were killed who were innocent. They were not involved in any political activities or Zionist activities. The second leader, Abbas Tufaili, was killed along with his wife and child in 1982 by Israel. Nasrallah changed the party in many ways. You may hate the party, you may dislike it, you may attack it from a secular leftist point of view, like I do, but you should also see that he changed it in many ways. For one, and this is amazingly radical for an Islamist organization, in the political document of 2009, for the first time, Hezbollah spoke against hostility against Jews as Jews. He said, our hostility is directed against Zionism. We have nothing against Judaism, against Jewish people. That to me is a radical, sharp change from the way the party used to speak and its rhetoric in the 1980s, for example. And when I speak about Lebanonization, I owe that insight about the term to my colleague Bashir Saadi in Edinburgh. He Lebanized it in a good way and a bad way. Like he got too involved in Lebanese politics, which I think is corrupting for any political party. But it also, in a sense, that he introduced him to different Lebanese groups and leaders, and he finally understood that the project that the party advocated in its early inception in 1980s to establish an Islamic Republic in Lebanon is totally impossible. And I heard him say that to me, that we came to realize that we cannot establish, we cannot, and he also said it publicly and privately, I heard him say that not one sect can prevail in Lebanon. You
Right.
realize you have to do give and take. And as a result, you have to compromise. And you can argue about the compromises, which compromises the party did and which were not necessary, and so on. I personally believe that after the assassination of Rafiq Hariri in 2005, the party was dragged by the Americans indirectly to be represented by the cabinet so that it can bear responsibility for the corruption of the Lebanese government.
Mm.
That was a big mistake. And I think Nasrallah also got to speak on many matters of internal Lebanese politics that he should have avoided and focus instead on the strategic goal of resistance against Israeli occupation and aggression and rendering help to the Palestinian cause, which is very important to him. I mean, say what you want about Nasrallah, and Saudi media used to attack him, saying that he doesn't care about Palestine. I mean, obviously, and this is something that I know. I mean, I spent the summer in Lebanon. The decision to engage in what is called a war of support or solidarity for Gaza by Hezbollah in October after the October 7 was largely taken by Nasrallah
Mm.
and not by Iran. Iran did not want that. Iran did not want escalation. I mean, I think that Netanyahu gave Nasrallah indirectly credit, something that many Lebanese did not know or did not want to believe, especially his enemies, that Nasrallah was a policymaker not only within his own party, but he was a chief policymaker within the entire Iranian axis. I mean, Qasim Soleimani and the president of Iran, no matter who he was, were subordinate to Nasrallah. That's how high his stature was. He was second only to the supreme leader, and the supreme leader counted on him and sought his counsel on all matters, with the exception, I learned that last summer, the nuclear file was entirely done by the Iranians. However, I am told that Nasrallah was always briefed about all the details of nuclear negotiations between the Iranians and the Westerners.
Wow. And anytime someone said, don't bring up Soleimani around Katie, I always do have to mention how handsome he is. So that's something I have to mention all the time.